All right, delighted to be here. The logical way to give a talk is to start with a conceptual foundation and then build it up to the implications and applications. I'm going to do it the other way around, because the more fundamental issues are more complicated and not necessary. So let me start at the top, and I think it's easier to follow that way. So we start with the issue of how we apply meaning to life. This is particularly relevant to me now. There's a new journal and commissioned me to write a target article on evolution and meaning. Evolution, of course, is all about life. And I took up the challenge. It's particularly interesting. There's, as we know, a vast literature on evolution, including in psychology, evolutionary psychology. They don't say much at all about meaning. Likewise, there's a large research literature on meaning, which talks very little about evolution. So exploring that interface is kind of an exciting idea. And it'll be a target article with commentaries. And I want to bring that up in case anyone, listens to my talk and says, "Oh, I have a point to make about this," or would just like to be put on the list for commentaries. Please stop me the next couple of days or send me an email, because when it's finished, we will be looking for commentators. It'll be the editor's decision, but they appreciate it if I give them some recommendations. So I just want to put that out there if you're looking for have something to say and would like to contribute to an interesting discussion, I think. I also want to say the foundation of my thinking in the last 20 years is that the essence of human nature is as a cultural animal. And by that I mean nature made us, so we evolved, but we evolved beyond that, and we evolved specifically to do culture. So the traits that make us human, that set us apart from the other creatures on the planet, are mostly adaptations to make culture possible, language being a prime example. Pretty sure all human cultures have languages, and nothing animals do really fully rises to the level of language as linguists would be satisfied with. There's some movement in certain directions. So I say culture is our biological strategy. It's how we solve the problems of survival and reproduction. All living things have to continue life by some mixture of surviving and reproducing. We do that with culture, by creating these social systems with shared information, division of labor, complex interactions, and so forth. And I bring that up because culture is made out of meaning. Culture is essentially a shared set of meanings. So highly relevant to what we were doing there, one key thing we did in human evolution that set us apart from even the other great apes is the greatly expanded use of meaning, especially collectively. But I'd say most animals are solipsisms. Solipsism is a philosophical term for the view that you mistake your own beliefs for or your own experience for objective reality. You don't have an idea that there are other minds with different perspectives and different ideas, and so on. Animals basically live like that, but we all know we are different. We are in a community of minds with 52 to 48% or whatever, different opinions about multiple issues. So, in terms of what makes life meanings, to revisit the list I came up with in terms of needs for meaning, back in '91, there was recently a special issue of Review of General Psychology on meaning, and one of the other editors and I said, well, it's done, we're not just going to put it to bed, let's push ourselves to go read all the articles again and come up with the common themes. In terms of properties of life meanings, purpose is still very strong. Indeed, Viktor Frankl, who kind of started all this, purpose for him was the essence of meaning in life. That's what he talked about. Others have soon added value is important. You want not just any purposes, but it should be something that you subjectively think is good and that you can devote a positive value to your life, not just pursuing any goal chosen at random. Some goals are better than others, and so on. Mattering is a common theme in today's writings about meaning of life. To be a sort of combination of the other two needs that I mentioned. Efficacy, which means you can do something to make a difference. So it's not enough just to have a purpose to strive, or purpose out there, but something where you can succeed or fail, and so you can exert effort to try to move things forward toward your purpose. And as I said, you get value as an individual, some degree of self-worth from the fact that you matter. So mattering is sort of the current term for it, needs a bit of an intuitive concept and needs more formal definition, but it looks like some kind of combination of those. Other themes, continuity. Now animals basically live in the present, and their ability to connect across time is extremely limited. People who've looked into this far more expertise than I have Concluding, no, they just essentially, they can't even think in terms of living across time. But the very idea of a purpose is that the present has meaning by connection to something in the future. And continuity extends that idea even further, that your present is a result of your past and extending into the future. This sort of narrative consistency, certain events brought you here and it's leading toward some goals or ideals in the future. Coherence means not just as one thing after another, but the parts should fit together as in a good story rather than a bad story. The good story is more coherent. So that's what current thinking seems to be about life's meaning. I'm obviously in favor of life's meanings, but we also have to be skeptical as scientists. And so there's a certain amount of life's meanings that I kind of talk about somewhat pejoratively as monkeys in tuxedos. The idea is you're taking basic animal things and dressing them up to sound like they're some kind of highfalutin, fancy, grandiose thing. So you look at what people say, what's the meaning of your life all about? Family comes up often and very early in most people's accounts. Okay, well, fine, family contributes to meaning in life, but it's certainly not anything that we invented as human beings, or that's especially dependent on culture or whatever. Animals have families too, and nature is a strong part of that. Love, sexuality, relationships, likewise status, and so on. So a lot of the meaning of life things might be just the sort of basic animal motivations dressed up to sound fancier than they need be. In contrast, there are other sources of meaning in life that are quite unlike anything found in the animal world. Animals don't have religion, creative art beyond occasionally making up a new bird song or something to impress a potential mate. Science, advanced politics. Animal ape tribes and so on have certain political struggles for who's going to be on top and so on. But things on the order of Brexit, go back to Martin's fine talk, don't really seem to occur much. So anyway, getting involved in advanced political things, again, that's a source of meaning specific to human. Various moral virtues, likewise, are things not seen in nature. So sources of meaning in life, some are strongly rooted in nature. Some seem to be moving far beyond nature and things that we have developed ourselves. Possibly researchers interested in meaning of life will be able to find some interesting differences between people who draw their meaning from these more advanced things versus more of the fundamental things. Now, why do we apply meaning to life? One point that struck me is the difference between change and stability. Life essentially is change. You can think of a living thing as a set of chemical reactions that are interrelated and operate as a unity and try to sustain themselves as long as they can. When they stop, you're dead. So life is change. That's hard to dispute. But it also has a deeply rooted yearning for stability. And that animals seek a stable relationship to their environment where they can get food and water reliably, where they're reasonably safe, raise their offspring to an extent. They do that and so on. Yes. A stable environment in my pocket would be good too. I bring up this idea somewhat introduced by Schrödinger, the Nobel Prize winner in physics, with the term negative entropy. If you've had university physics, entropy is the tendency of physical, as in non-living systems, to become more and more random for chaotically spread. They reach a certain loss of organization. But life, he says, is the essence of life is the opposite. It's seeking ever greater stability, ever greater organization. It happens at the individual living thing trying to establish a stable relationship, happens collectively, evolution moves toward greater organization, and so on. So this is a key insight into the essence of life, seeking for stability. So why am I bringing this up? Well, meaning is an important tool for stability. And Martin brought up some good examples about meanings changing, but the stability is much more important. Most of you and I have never met, and yet we can communicate because the words I'm using have a stable meaning that you know and that I know, and they meant the same thing yesterday as tomorrow. Indeed, learning, which is sort of one of the foundations, or the most basic uses of meaning, is you're noticing patterns in the environment, noticing what stimulus or what response works for what stimulus, and so on. associating things together, generalizing, saying, well, the last time I was in a similar situation, this worked, so I should do it again, or this didn't work, so I shouldn't do it again. The essence, again, is stable over time. You move to a radically different environment, that your learning becomes irrelevant, and that makes it more difficult. So, again, meaning imposes stability. As I said, the meanings of words and concepts. I mean, arithmetic, 3 + 5 = 8. That's the same every culture in the world that uses arithmetic gets the same answer. It was true before there were humans, and it'll be true after we've wiped ourselves out. So there's an inherent stability in pure meaning there. So again, applying math to the world helps us bring it under control and impose stability on it. And in the social world, the same thing. Two creatures might have a relationship and they feel differently about each other on different days and interact in different ways and so on, but to define them as married, put some meaningful definition on the relationship, that increases the stability. It makes it more likely they will stay together, as empirically married couples stay together more than unmarried couples, and so on. So the fact of being married does not oscillate or change and so on. It imposes a definition on the relationship that is then stable. So there's that, and more broadly in social systems, lots of uses of meaning again impose stability, whether we're talking about laws or rules or traditions, that something was valuable in the past and so we retain it and use it again. Again, meaning is a tool to facilitate. Again, life has changed that seeks stability. Meaning is a powerful tool to facilitate that quest for stability. Other aspect is meaning enables greater complexity. By planning, we can accomplish much more difficult, complex enterprises. Managing a society of thousands or even millions of people only becomes possible with large-scale communication and so on. That's why no animal societies exceed having about 150 members, other than ants and humans. Ants do it in an unusual way, and so do we. We rely on meaning to do that, and our social organization is therefore much more flexible because we can introduce new ideas for changing our relationship to the mainland. Use of meaning enables increasingly complex social systems. Again, the idea of culture is made of meaning. So back to the idea of how we evolved to use meaning. Biologically, natural selection, success is measured in increase in population. So what the human brains or simple brains learn to do is to organize patterns of nerve cell firings to represent meanings. And this occurred in 2 steps in terms of the payoff and the uses of meaning. There's the one that solitary minds learn to use this first, and then the collective meaning really will enable meaning to do much more powerful benefits. We focus then on the first step, the solitary use of meaning. Simple thoughts, association, the 2 things are connected. This imposed a structure on the world, already enabled learning and created huge advantages for very simple animals that were able to learn this. But meaning always makes a distinction that this is this and not that. You put things into categories, and so the simple animal that encounters a stimulus just wants to know, should I eat it, have sex with it, or run away from it, or ignore it? Categorizing in those terms is already very useful in enabling the animal to move its paws in the optimal direction. Accumulation is information is accumulated in the solitary mind and represented in meaningful terms, and expectancies then become a very important early form of thought as well. That 2 things are associated with each other, one leads to the other. Expectancy is a pattern completion over time. Once you see the first thing, you expect the second. Anyway, I just want to emphasize solitary minds long ago to use meaning in limited ways, but had huge advantages because animals that could learn do better than animals that cannot learn. The collective use of meaning, pretty much limited to humans, not entirely. There's social animals get a little bit by copying each other and so on. But a recent review concluded that all human societies have teaching and no animals have anything that really qualifies as intentional teaching. They have lots of learning, and they have avid mimickers and copiers and observational learning, but the idea of teaching requires you to be able to represent that you have information that another mind doesn't, and so you want to deliberately send that information, and it's really beyond the capabilities of pretty much all the other animals. A couple borderline cases that even just show how limited that is. So the collective use of meaning has really sent us very far, and the combining of symbols also, sort of like how much can you express in single words versus combining words. The difference is literally infinite. There's infinitely more information can be embedded in sentences than in single words. And the collective building up of knowledge, this is the key thing to human progress, that progress in evolution depends on biological change, which is very slow. By some estimates, a couple 100,000 years for genetic change to settle in, whereas information can spread, in days. So we store information not in the individual mind, but in the group. Wolves are very social animals, but each generation of wolves starts over, figuring out how to do things, whereas once we have collectively stored knowledge, each generation can start where the other left off. So progress is hugely accelerated in the human plan. We organize our interactions as well too. And what this means is that the human self, the sort of organizing master function that unifies the bodily processes and settles which response of the various possible ones is the best. The human self is partly an agent that traffics in information. It shares information with others, listens to what they say, critiques what they do, argues about things, sometimes puts out false information, and so on. So the shared body of information is important to understand too. Meanings are held in common, again, not just in the solitary mind, but in human. There's a large amount of collectively understood knowledge. There's a French sociologist who coined the term doxa. I don't know, maybe we need a new term. But the idea, regardless of the term, the idea is important because of that which goes without saying. And so when Martin spoke there, he could talk about Brexit and everyone knew what he was talking about. He didn't have to, he could put up the definition, it was a kind of a joke at the beginning, but he didn't have to explain the whole history and stuff because we have all that shared knowledge, and therefore we can discuss current status and current ideas and debates to it without starting from the ground up. And it hugely increases the efficiency of interaction. As I said, it's the basis of progress. Language itself, of course, has to be essentially shared, and it's one of the key foundations. And so every human baby learns the language that is spoken in its environment, so that it can enter into the doxa and start participating with others. People are also highly motivated to cultivate shared informations, whereas other animals have curiosity. They have the motivation to acquire information. They don't have any particular motivation or desire to tell anyone else. And a few ways in nature shape them to do that automatically. The bees doing a little dance in the air, but they don't think, oh, I'm really going to send them off on a wild goose chase today or whatever. They have no conscious knowledge of what they are doing, whereas we do. We intentionally communicate, and you see something new, you think, oh, I got to tell somebody about this. This is so cool. They also are motivated to have this shared understanding, to the extent that sometimes people will neglect the truth in order to agree with others. And particularly, facts are often simplified so that they'll fit into the doxa more easily and more readily. But there's some fine experimental studies that if I want to tell you something and I know you have a certain bias, I'll shape the way I tell it to you, which departs from the facts. But then after we've communicated, then I'll remember what I told you rather than the facts as they were. So my understanding moves away from the truth in order to build the shared understanding. And of course, the information agent aspect of the self is based on this, dealing in relation to the shared information. All right. Now I move on to some of the more basic issues and concerns, like what is meaning? Well, a couple things emerged from this review of general psychology special issue, and things I've been thinking about for a while. But two features of meaning that are, I think, essential and we need to appreciate. First, meaning is a non-physical connection. It is relationships between things that are not a symbolic relationship, for example, is not a physical connection between them. They may be far apart, but symbolically it's a non-physical relationship. And also potential organization. That meaning enables us to organize, classify things, understand them, likewise to organize our social interactions with rules and customs and strictures and norms and so forth, so that we can interact more effectively in more mutually satisfactory ways and more productive ways to ultimately lead to better survival and better reproduction. So I think appreciating those two facts gets you closer to the idea of what meaning is. Now, I want to insist meaning is real, and it's not physically real. And this is something I grappled with in the '91 book. And I should say, I wrote that when I was young and foolish, and now that I'm old and foolish, I'm thinking of having another go at it. So one reason I came to the conference was to hear some new ideas and talk about them and share them. So I'd be glad to hear thoughts that other people have. So, sometime in the next few years I'll do it. But there's also a lot more literature available now on meaning and so forth. So I'm looking forward to revisiting that set of intellectual problems. Anyway, one thing I conclude then, and it still seems to be true, is that meaning is not physically real, but it is nevertheless real, which kind of implies a non-Cartesian dualism, or I recently spoke to some philosophers and they said they would go for pluralism rather than the dualism. Dualism means two, and maybe there are more than two kinds of reality. But Descartes said there's the mind and the body, and those are the two realities. In a sense, he got us having the wrong debate for the last couple centuries, because minds don't exist independent of bodies, but meaning is really a different kind of reality. The fact that 3 + 5 = 10 is false. That falseness is, again, it's found in all cultures. It always was true. It will be true after humankind ceases to exist. It's funny to say the falseness is true, but the truth value remains the same. So there is something quite real there, but it is not a physical thing. And some of my colleagues have difficulty accepting the idea that anything could be real but not physically real. But if you've had university physics, you know that physical matter has a certain set of physical properties. There's the mass, there's a precise location in space. I mean, you take a physical thing like this, it has a certain, the weight is the mass times the gravity. Precise location, it is here, it's moving as I shake it, it accelerates or not. There's magnetic electronic charge, chemical molecular structure, and that's pretty much about it. There might be one or two I missed. Essentially there. Whereas meaning has none of these properties. And to go back to the example of Brexit, I mean, it's absurd to say Brexit as a mass. You could say it's gaining velocity or something, but that's not symbolic. It doesn't have velocity in the sense that a physicist would accept, nor chemical composition or molecular structure or any of those things. So it is real, but it has none of the properties of physical matter. And the same is true for language and justice and many other things that we would use to designate as meaning. Mathematics is a useful example because there we have a pure meaning system. I struggled over is math natural or cultural for a while because you learn it from your culture. Babies aren't born knowing math. But then all cultures get the same answers. And usually if it's the same in all cultures, then you think, well, it's more nature than culture. But when I finally realized it isn't quite either one, it's a cultural discovery of this non-physical reality that yet is important organizing principles and helps us understand the physical world, is way too much and too complex for any individual to figure it out. If you were never interacted with another human being, and you decided to invent arithmetic, you probably wouldn't get very far. That's why kids learn it in schools and so on. But the knowledge had to be built up over many generations, many different people working together, putting math into the doxa so they collectively understand. It's a case again of collectively people working together to build up shared knowledge and shared understandings by exploring the world of meaning. Now, you might say, well, maybe mathematics is a special case or anything, but I think it's not. In fact, I sort of recently grappling with the idea that really there's sort of one universe of possible concepts, and all languages use it. They map it out differently, they make different sounds and different sequences to express the same ideas, but you can express an idea in almost every language. And the effectiveness of translation, yes, I know translation loses subtle shades of meaning, and in different cultures, the different languages might slice things slightly differently. But as Brown pointed out in his book on universals, anthropology has been pushing the view for a long time that every culture is different, but that is based on their funding structure, because if you go out into the wild and spend 2 years in a certain giant sum of grant money to study the bongos, and you come back and say, well, they're pretty much like everybody else. You're not going to get another grant. So the anthropologists are motivated to say, oh, no, this group is so interesting because they do something no other group does. But he says, at conferences in the evening, when they have a couple of beers, they start to admit, yeah, everyday conversation is pretty much the same everywhere, I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow, my child is sick, you're looking good in that dress. All kinds of things. More broadly, again, the effectiveness of translation means that pretty much every idea can be expressed in pretty much every language. It's hard to find even a single convincing counterexample for, there's certain concepts that we don't have a word for in English, like schadenfreude, but we all know what it means. And there's even a term, a linguistic lacuna, means that there's a hole in our language, so we don't have a word for that concept. So it kind of says the concept is out there, we just don't have a term for it. So it gives me the idea there is one universe of possible concepts, and every language uses it there. So again, the universe of meaning exists independently of the physical world, and languages, individuals use it to our benefit. Now, another idea sort of roaming around in psychology these days is that thinking is just some kind of chemical reaction in your brain. But that's not it. Yes, brain cells have to fire for there to be thoughts, but they are representing the thought. They are not constituting it. And so, to use the English language as an example, the English language is in all our brains, I hope. Otherwise, you're having a very boring time listening to me. But sad to say, at some point, all our brains will cease to exist, but the English language will continue without undiminished by that. And so the brains are tapping into the collective understanding. And indeed, many brains can have the same thought, and that's the key thing. The meaning is in the sameness of the thought. And so each brain represents it slightly differently with different nerve cells firing and so on. But it is the same thought, which is what makes communication possible. And again, sameness is an organizing principle. We can only work together if we have shared understanding. So we look at early plans like planning a hunt, that well, you guys go here and make a lot of noise and it'll scare the game this way. I'll circle around and catch some here, and you make some arrows and we'll shoot them, and so on. Having the shared understanding by use of meaning enabled humans to be much more effective hunters than other creatures, like lions, for whom we're certainly no match on a one-to-one basis, but our use of culture enabled us to prevail over them. So, another point about meaning being separate from the physical world. Meaning does not have any physical power. So is the question, does meaning move molecules? Well, meaning can't really do it by itself, but the idea that ideas cause behavior is a foundational assumption in many of the social sciences, and political science and economics and sociology and so on, take it for granted that ideas are important movers in history. So how do we reconcile these? That the ideas, that meaning not being a physical thing, it can't exert causality in the physical world. Well, the answer question is that brains evolved to be complex enough to make use of meaning, so they're able to pull in this non-physical reality and use it to guide behavior, which then alters the course of physical events. So molecules are moved based on ideas. It's not that the ideas independently move the molecules, but the brains use the ideas in order to guide their behavior. Like the example of burning the flag, you can furnish a purely physical account of the burning of the flag, in which the combination of heat and oxygen gradually converts the molecules of the cloth into ashes and smoke. But that would miss the point, that it's burnt for symbolic reasons. And this flag, maybe it's in Tehran, so yeah, it's a bunch of molecules very far from what it's representing. The United States may never have been in the United States. It's probably made in China. And the people in Tehran are burning it, not to make warmth for dinner, but so much to express their dissatisfaction with the policies of the government. And so the causation of this event, meaning, is a prominent part of it, that you can't understand the event without the ideas and the meanings that motivated it. So meaning moves beyond physical causation. Or money is another great example. Money just based on shared understandings. Money, a certain number of coins equals a certain number of bills, but you could inspect the molecular structure of those coins at great length and never find out what makes them equivalent. Money's highly effective organizing principle. It's fashionable to speak negatively of money, but come on, money was invented a couple thousand years ago, rapidly spread from one culture to another. No culture's ever gotten rid of money. It really makes life better. Trade is much more difficult without money because it extends over time. In order for trade to work, I have to have something you want and you have to have something I want right now. But with money, if I can still get what I want from you, even if I don't have anything you want, because I can give you money and you can use that in the future to get what you want from somebody else. There's never been a society that got rid of money. The Soviet Union tried briefly, and it was a complete disaster, and they have not repeated that again. So money, a powerful organizing principle for making society better, but again, depends on meaning. So last couple points. Meaning, again, is something we use collectively, and so provided advantages to groups, so that groups that used meaning better, probably an evolution that communicated better and had a better stock of knowledge, prevailed over other groups, not least because they survived and reproduced better than others. The accumulation of knowledge over generations, what Tomasello calls the ratchet effect, that each time you invent something, it's there, and the culture has that forever. He points out other great apes will solve problems. They're fairly smart, but after a while it's just forgotten and it doesn't get passed on to the next generation in most cases, so it has to be invented again, sometimes even by the same people. And a final point or implication about this, essence of meaning is compare something to what the alternative is. We can only say that this is high if there's such a thing as low, or this is a success if there's a possibility of failure, or you choose to marry this person instead of marrying that person. So whereas physical reality just is, meaning really brings into the equation what is not there, and sees what is there in relation and contrast to what is not there. Because of that, it creates alternative possibilities. Some of these will remain unrealized, some of them do. It's no accident that humans have societal change vastly more than any other creature does. There's no democracy in nature, but somehow humans got the idea, well, we'll just take a vote and let the majority represent the will of the people. Again, other animals haven't developed a market economy or technology or reinvented the roles of female wolves or anything like that. So meaning enables us to think of alternative possibilities, and some put some of these into practice. So it has a transformative potential there. But applied to the individual life, it sort of means the more meaningful it is, the more incomplete it is, because meaning creates alternative possibilities, and you can only live one life, so the alternative possibilities remain unrealized. In a very simple life, maybe there weren't two other opportunities, and it could be reasonably complete, but meaning itself seems to create incompleteness. In terms of meaning of life, as I said, I want to revisit the question, and I like to think, we're going to tackle a complex question. What would the answer look like? What would be the form of a meaning of life? So an individual's life meaning, well, it's probably a story to some degree, if you have narrative and propositional knowledge. So most lives aren't represented by a principle so much as a story, as a coherent sequence of events, or probably more likely several different stories, you know, the career and marriage and maybe a couple other things. The loosely interrelated stories. They have moral themes, so life is essentially a moral narrative of how you tried to do what you thought was good. Occasionally you slipped up and did bad things and then atoned for them, and so on. The choices were made on a recognition of this could be good or bad. And indeed, my humanities colleagues say most literature shows people grappling with difficult choices and trying to do what's good or doing what's not good. The story ends with death, and death really doesn't really have relation to the rest of life in most cases. I mean, if you're a soldier or a martyr or something like that, maybe your death is part of what your life is all about. But for most people, death is just an interruption. So life is a moral narrative, a story with an unhappy ending that doesn't have any relation to the rest of the story. The incomplete narrative, that would be what we were looking for as the typical meaning of life, incomplete moral narrative. And ideas, all human lives are incomplete, but some probably more incomplete than others, and ironically, many of the most meaningful ones will have more alternative possibilities, only some of which come true, and through the unrealized potential, it's the more incomplete. So, just to sum up, some meanings of life are the monkeys in tuxedos, taking basic natural processes and dressing them up with a fancy gloss. Others are not, and I think the distinction is worth exploring further. Okay, I'll be done before that. Second, life is changed, but it seeks stability. Meaning helps the creature achieve a stable relationship to the environment, satisfy its needs to continue life, and so on. So meaning is important and is used to impose organization and stability on life and satisfy this basic yearning in living things to create a more stable kind of life. Brains evolved to process meaning, probably in at least two heuristic steps. The first is to do so individually, to form abstract representations of knowledge about the environment, and then to use these collectively by communicating, sharing information with others, and building up a common stock of knowledge. And this collective use of meaning is the essence of human culture. Two, meaning is not physically real, so it can become entered into physical reality when brains, which are physical things, use meaning to guide their actions so that ideas enter into the stream of causality. This, in natural science terms, this is emergence, so a higher level phenomena emerging. It's not, if you go down to the lower molecular level, you will lose meaning as well as you lose love and self and country and a lot of other things. Key aspects of meaning, if we want to understand what it is and how it works, the non-physical connection, the physical world, things interact by the laws of physics, but we see symbolic connections and abstract representations and categories and so on. And also organization, meaning is very useful for organizing the world both in the individual mind and collectively with shared understandings to impose organization on our behavior and on our society so we can steer it in the direction that we want it to go. As I said, we're the only species with ongoing sociological change, but because we can communicate and because we can represent alternative possibilities, we can say, well, maybe the whole society would be better off if we completely change how we do things. And as I said, democracy unknown in nature, would never have evolved biologically. And last, it's the collective use of meaning is what propelled our species to its hegemony on the planet, for better and for worse. It's been a powerful tool. The social interaction uses this shared understanding of meaning. We interact on the basis of shared assumptions. If you've ever gone on a date with someone from a very different culture, you know you have to negotiate a lot more than you do with somebody who grew up in the same town you did. So it's the shared understandings really facilitate interaction. Lives draw meaning from the group's shared understandings. What we count as the most meaningful lives are the ones that contribute to the welfare of the group as well as the individual. The people who we put up statues for and remember them centuries afterwards, who did things that raised the collective well-being not only of themselves and their families, the monkey and tuxedo kind of thing, but more broadly the society in general. And last, the typical meaning of life would be an incomplete moral narrative. Meaning may indeed contribute to incompleteness. Thank you.